okay, if I'm working really hard, if I wanted to create something that ultimately feeds back to me and that I love instead of just, kind of being beholden to someone else.
You're listening to Thrive by Design, business, marketing, and lifestyle strategies for your jewelry brand to flourish and thrive. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Thrive by Design podcast, episode 199. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. We are coming up on episode 200. Hey there, it's Tracy Matthews, Chief Visionary Officer over at Flourish and Thrive Academy. I'm your host for Thrive by Design. This is the place where we share business and marketing advice with people in the design industry, with jewelry designers, makers. If you are a fashion designer or an accessories designer, everything that we teach here is completely applicable to your business too. And you never know, over at Flourish and Thrive, we might be opening up into other verticals soon, which I'm excited. So anyway, I have a very special guest here. Her name is Laura Powers. She is an artist. She's a designer. She is a psychic. She's a model. She's an actress and a marketer. And I think it's really interesting. We connected on Instagram a couple of months ago, and we had a fun conversation. She asked me to be on her podcast. And as we were talking, I was like, oh, you should be on my show too. It was sort of this random quick evolution. And all of a sudden we're interviewing each other to be on each other's shows, which is really cool. And at the end of the day, I'm always looking for people to talk about different ways to get exposure for your brand. And I think that a lot of times we go the tried and true path. We end up, everyone's pitching the same magazines, everyone's trying to get on the same influencers, everyone's trying to do all the things. But sometimes what we don't think about are other ways to get name recognition or exposure or eyeballs or people listening to what we do and literally listening, like being on a podcast. And so Laura's going to be on talk on the show today a little bit about alternative marketing strategies, which I'm very excited about, including podcasting to get exposure for your brand. And I think we're going to hear some interesting tidbits and highlights of things that you can do as a designer to get exposure. So let's do this. Before I dive in, I was speaking with a SOS designer the other day. For any of you who are in our community, you might know Marcia Newquist. And we were chatting in our Facebook group, and she kept talking about how she was posting video. And I think this is irrelevant to what we're doing here. And I did a little experiment on Instagram the other day. And for some reason, we had a huge influx of new followers, and we had a huge influx of new people engaging with our brand. And I truly believe, because the day that I posted on Instagram, on IGTV, and I used the preview in the feed, for some reason, the video got pushed out into the feed and created this massive influx of people all on the same day. And I kept scrolling down. I'm like, did we get mentioned by someone? I'm like, what is this? I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, we're on a strategy to be doing a lot more video here at Flourish and Thrive Academy, in particular on Facebook and social and all those platforms, but using it to leverage different audiences in different places and to get to a place where we're building our audience. And so as Marcia and I were chatting, because her business is growing a ton, she's been in our SOS program for about 6 months. And I have to tell you, this girl, she's invested in this program and she's squeezing out every single morsel. She's posting consistently. She is taking the actions that we tell her to do and getting the work done in her business. And I think the incredible thing is that when I posted, I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to try to do a daily video challenge on the social platforms. Anyone want to join? Marcia was the first to chime in and say yes. And so what I want to just really empower you to do is to start thinking outside of the box about how you're getting exposure for your brand and how you're using that exposure to convert people to engage them on your social platforms and beyond. And what we're going to talk about today with Laura is awesome, but I'm also doing a masterclass next week called the Sales Accelerator Masterclass. It's designed to help you move a lot forward with your sales strategy. And so I'm really excited about it. I'm going to be talking about our 3-part genius model for sales acceleration, which is the best way to put it. And I'm going to talk about how you can really create more freedom in your life. And I know that as people start to build their business and they're thinking about how they're growing, what ends up happening that keeps businesses very small. I just did a video on this too, because we have a huge number of people in our community that are in two categories. They're either in the mid 5-figure range and they're trying to cross that 6-figure mark, or they're in the low to mid 6 figures, but they've been stuck there for many years. And there's a similar issue about why, and that's because they're working too much in their business and not focusing on the things that are actually going to move the needle forward. And so instead of really focusing and leaning in on the things that are making the most impact, including sales, they are trying to do it all. And that spreads your energy thin. It also affects your sales, and it will prevent you from continuing to grow. And so I'm excited about this masterclass. If you're interested on how it will work for you, it doesn't matter really if you're a 5 or a 6-figure business. You might have already kind of cracked a code if you're already in the 7-figure range. You can just message me directly if you want to talk about digital marketing strategy, and we can discuss that. But at the end of the day, the Sales Acceleration Masterclass is really going to help you crush those things that are actually working for you so that you can dive deep and make more sales very quickly. And I'm excited about it. So you can head on over if you want to register to flourishthriveacademy.com/sales accelerator. I'll have a link in the show notes as well. That's flourishthriveacademy.com/sales accelerator. All right, cool. So let's dive into today's episode. I have a very interesting guest on the show today, Laura Powers, and I'm going to let her share a little bit about her background because it is not the unique approach to marketing. Laura, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we met like randomly on Instagram a couple weeks ago.
I know. We
started chit-chatting and you're like, I want you to be on my podcast. And I was like, tell me what you do. And you're like, well, I love podcasting and marketing and all this stuff. And we just started this conversation. So now you're on my podcast too, talking about alternative ways to market your brand. And so I'm excited to talk to you because you have you're not a normal guest that I would bring on the podcast. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. And by the way, I am probably not a normal person compared to almost anyone. I'm very used to hearing that people are like, oh, I've never met someone like you. So I'm most known as a psychic, and I have built a successful business as a psychic. I do, teach classes. I do private services. I travel pretty much full time. So I go to various cities, primarily domestically, but some international travel, teach classes, see clients, do media appointments wherever I am, and just kind of do that wherever. So I do that. I do make more money when I do that, but also because I like to travel. So that's the lifestyle that I wanted to create, was to basically just kind of be wherever I want to be and have a business that supports my travel lifestyle. So I created that in an unusual way with my business as a psychic. Prior to that, I had a completely different, background. My master's in poli-sci. I was in public administration, higher education, and politics. But my undergrad is in theater. And as I transitioned out of that, I used to make my living as an actress. But it was kind of a grind. So I switched to, the more practical livelihood of being a psychic. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. But actually, I was making a lot more money. So I switched to that being my primary focus. But I've always loved entertaining. I've always loved hosting, talking with people, teaching, connecting. And podcasting for me has provided this amazing platform to build my business, build my brand, connect with amazing people, just like we are now. I mean, just because of podcasting is basically why we're talking. And I've had amazing opportunities open up for me in that way, and I'm a real advocate of building not just work that you love, but a lifestyle that you love. So for me, that involves traveling, that involves making my own schedule, that involves like, if I want to go to Cannes, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go to Cannes, and then I'm going to build everything around that. And I don't have to ask them for time off. And, I just kind of make it happen.
Or not make money because you're trading dollars for hours.
Exactly. Like I had, a pretty traditional career, and I remember one time I had, 30 hours, 4 weeks of vacation, and I wanted to go to this study abroad program in Prague, and I asked for it off well in advance, and they said no. And I literally waited till 2 weeks before, and then I said, okay, well, you can approve my leave or I quit. That's
oh my gosh.
I felt about that. So, my boss wasn't really happy with me about that. But that kind of thing is what really led me to like, okay, if I'm working really hard, if I'm working my butt off, I want it to be to create something that ultimately feeds back to me and that I love instead of just, kind of being beholden to someone else.
So I want to like really kind of relate the message that this message to our listeners, because with a physical product-based business, sometimes we are tied to an office, but we have a choice. And I think that when we build a business around what matters to us most, that's when money starts to come in and when opportunities start to open up. And I think a lot of that happens when you think outside of the box. And I know, Laura and I just kind of recently met and we're kind of learning each other's backgrounds. But when I started my first business as a jewelry designer, I felt really tied to an office space and employees and team. And when I closed that business and started my new company, my number one value was flexibility and being able to work remotely from wherever I was. Similarly to you, I love to travel and I'm single and don't have kids. So I wanted to be able to see my nieces and nephews grow up, and be able to head to California for a couple of weeks without my business stopping because I wasn't there to physically produce product or because I wasn't physically there to open the door to let people in my jewelry studio. So I've really discovered and learned how to build a business around what matters to me most, which is freedom and flexibility, financial abundance, and all those things. And I'm glad that we met because I feel like there was alignment there.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And by the way, sometimes there's a need for that, for that to happen, to have, a space and, your equipment or your inventory or whatever. But that also doesn't mean that you always have to be the person handling that. So,
exactly.
Like in my case, I'm an author, I have books and, they need to get mailed out, but I have, I have several people that help me out. And I've also learned to do things in a way that is where I'm not having to do it. So I have, I have my assistant, I have my podcast editor, and then I have my podcast producer. So I have 3 people that, they are doing a lot of the stuff that is the stuff that I either don't want to do or it's just not convenient for me to do. And so there's ways to, even if that stuff is required, to set it up so that you don't have to be doing it all yourself.
100%. Totally. That's so true. And I'm a huge advocate in outsourcing, whether that be by hiring employees or hiring contractors or hiring vendors or hiring a virtual assistant or whatever. And so I think that virtual in this day and age, virtual or remote maybe is a better way to put it because they can be in the same town, but it's not necessarily that you have to be in the same physical location all the time in order to keep the business going. And the benefit of this is that the overhead on building a business is so much lower than the traditional modality of having people clocking in for full-time hours necessarily. Because when you're starting out and you need help, I think the thing that most of the designers that I mentor and the makers that I mentor get overwhelmed by is that they think they need to have the budget for a full-time employee when maybe they need the budget to outsource 10 hours a week to a freelancer who's a stay-home mom who wants some admin work while her kids are napping or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. Start small. And there are some incredibly talented virtual assistants that are not in the United States, for example, and you can still feel good about paying them a wage that is, in your budget, helps them. And, that they provide good work. So I've had good success with assistants in various places. My current assistant right now is in the Philippines. And so, it's a very low rate. I mean, you can literally get an assistant for, between $3 to $7 an hour. Yeah. And if you start out, maybe you just need 5 hours a week. Maybe you just need 10 hours a week. And that's okay, but that can still be really helpful and give you the time and energy to focus your energy on what is going to be most impactful and helpful for you in your business and moving forward. And also there's an appearance thing that's helpful when you have an assistant. I do think that people will, take you more seriously for certain things. So it's a credibility thing and it's for your mental time and energy as well as, how you're presenting yourself externally.
And also, I was just on a call with Brett, who's in our SOS coaching program, before this earlier today. And I was helping her kind of get out of her head, what can she outsource? And we had this almost exact conversation. I'm like, get a VA in the Philippines to do like all this administrative work, take it off your plate, have them on, and then eventually just get 10 hours a week a business manager or operations manager who's like a fractional operations / what they call in the online world business manager, who takes care of the day-to-day stuff and makes sure that the stuff's getting done so that you can free up your mind to do the things that are actually growing your business, which I feel like this podcast is turning into a business growth podcast instead of a marketing one.
Yeah, well, it's connected, but if you're not marketing, if you don't get yourself out there, it's harder to grow your business. So, I mean, I think you're right, but it's also because I think they're inherently connected. And I can totally talk about, some marketing tools and, strategies that help me, because for me, it's been a really key part of my business growth has been marketing and media in particular, and utilizing that as, leveraging that for growth.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think, I want you guys to keep an open mind, because even though Laura has a different kind of business, there is like huge validity in some of the things that she's going to say from an exposure perspective, that you can have conversations with people and pitch media, alternative types of media that you're not thinking about. It's not going to be a print magazine necessarily, or the traditional influencer. I mean, maybe an influencer partnership is part of it, but might not be some of those things. But these are all ways to kind of reach your dream client and your audience in a different way. And so, Laura, let's talk about, I want to talk about podcasting first, because I know this is your number one passion and something that you're really doing about using podcasting for exposure from like a brand perspective.
Yeah, so podcasting is really incredible for several reasons. One of them is that there aren't generally gatekeepers. So unlike a lot of other media or formats where it might be harder to kind of break in, it's usually pretty easy to access someone who hosts a podcast, unless they're like a huge podcast or something, and, connect with them, possibly be a guest. And also learning from other podcasts is amazing. So I'm not only host several podcasts, but I listen to lots of podcasts. But yeah, it's great because you can reach out to podcasters and pitch yourself. I think one of the important things to do, just like anything, is make sure that you're being professional, have, materials, have one sheet, have a, bio, have a description of what you're offering or what you can talk about on their show that's relevant, and make sure that you're pitching, shows that are relevant to whatever it is that you are offering. But one of the great things about podcasting in particular is that they tend to be very niche audiences. So while I do love mainstream media, and I've done, television and radio that reach like big, large audiences, actually doing really niche audiences is very successful way to reach people that are probably going to have a specific interest in whatever it is that you offer. So design podcasts, there are jewelry podcasts. And I'm also a huge advocate of starting a podcast on something, because it's an amazing way, like if you have the time, and it doesn't have to be as much time as people think, to network and connect and get known in a particular area.
Well, yeah. And we had a designer in our SOS coaching program as well, who in our accelerator, who she designs Christian jewelry. And so she was recently on a Christian podcast. And
exactly
a huge direct correlation. Or, like a lot of the designers that we do design like healing, crystal-y, gemstone kind of jewelry. Like that's a great opportunity. I'm not trying to get you a ton of pitches here, but you might be after this. No. Like a podcast that's talking about alternative sources of healing or alternative medicine, because those are all might not be things that you would normally think about because it's not specifically designed. But that's really where you're going to be reaching consumers to buy your product.
Absolutely. So yeah, thinking of maybe a little bit outside of how you might normally, but yeah, who are your customers going to be and who might be interested in that? So I've actually on my sort of Mind, Body, Spirit podcast, I interviewed someone who designs sacred geometry jewelry, so, wow. That's definitely a fit. And I know that they've sold. I mean, when people are on my show, because I have such a large audience, and let me just give some numbers to give people some context for this. So I just passed 8 million downloads.
That's awesome.
And thank you. And the bulk of those are from my Mind, Body, Spirit one, because that's the one that I've been doing the longest. I've been doing that one for almost 8 years. But for about, 3.5 years, I got to like 3.5 million downloads. And then in the time since then, I've gotten, now 4.5. So basically in 1 year, I got 4 million downloads.
That's
It
awesome.
jumped from like all of those years combined, 3.5 to like then 1 million, And so it's something that definitely builds. But because, someone will typically find a podcast and like, they'll listen to mine and then they'll listen to like all the episodes. So even if I interviewed someone 8 years ago, that person's podcast is still being listened to. So if you have something that you're selling, I mean, it's not uncommon for people to sell that for years and years afterwards. So for them to be pitching podcasts that relate is totally relevant. And I also do affiliate marketing on mine. So for example, I had one affiliate that's a supplement where they were on the show. So again, it's a product, it's not a service. And, just in, a couple of months, for example, they sold, $5,000 of product just from my link. That's just for just 2 months. So the success can vary, but I say get yourself out there on podcasts and find ones that are either related to yours or where consumers of that podcast might be interested in whatever it is that you have to offer, and just do like a bunch of them. Just do at least one a week or several a week if you can, because it's one of those things that's like building over time, and it really will have a big impact, not just when you do it, but then like even years afterwards it can.
Yeah, because I feel like we're always referencing podcasts that we recorded, like someone wants to do like hashtag research and we're like, listen to episode 17 and we're on like almost the 200th episode of the podcast because hashtag research hasn't changed. And so it's, it's interesting how the longevity of something like that, because you're always out there, and if you can get on like, maybe like focus on getting on one podcast a month, that's great brand exposure.
Oh yeah. I mean, one a month is great. If you can do more, wonderful as well. And also you just don't know what's going to happen. So I have one client, this is like such a fascinating story, and I can share this because he's talked about it. So it's public, but he found me from listening to a different podcast. And then he found my podcast from that. He listened to all my podcasts, and then he booked a session with me. So that became a business thing for me. He, became a client, and then it became a repeat client. And in the session, I told him, he was going to write a book about spirituality and science and kind of bridging the gap between tech and spirituality. At the time, I don't think he really felt that was the case. But a year later, he wrote the book. In October, he released it. It's now a bestseller. And he references me in interviews all the time because I am what got him into this. So not that that's going to happen with everyone, but that is all from podcasting. That is all from me being, first of all, me being a guest on someone else's podcast and then hosting my own. So these kinds of things can have like this incredibly huge impact that you might not expect for relatively little effort.
Yeah. And you become like sort of a name in the back of people's heads.
You become a name, and also there's brand recognition, and people start to think of you, even if you don't think of yourself that way, as an expert, as someone who is, someone to reference and go to. And, so yeah, I think it's super beneficial. And then once you've had, like, if you're hosting, once you've had some good names on your podcast, it's easier to get others. Or if you've been on a certain number of shows, you can then, you can repost that on social media. You can list it on your website. You can pitch other shows that say, I've been featured on these, list them all. And suddenly it's like, oh, this person's been interviewed 10 times. They probably have something to say. It all helps you in the bigger picture,
100%. I love it. And I love the podcasting medium more than anything because it's really how we've been able to serve our audience best here. Because when people are making jewelry or making a physical product or making anything, it's hard to watch something. And I used to do a lot of video and I still do a lot of video, but it's hard to sit down and like stop what you're doing and watch something, and they can just listen. It's an intimate experience because you're in their head and in their ears. And I know my fan base, they're like, Tracy, I always hear you telling me like, X, Y, and Z or whatever, because it feels like you have it creates this personal connection. So it's not even just as a podcast host, but as a guest on a podcast. That's what you create with these people, and they want to work with you.
Absolutely. And one of the amazing things about podcasts, being a guest as well as a host on both ways, is that it has often led to more significant connections. So it'll start out with, a podcast, but sometimes I've ended up having much more significant working relationships with someone that initially started out as just like a podcast interview. Because what happens is you get to know each other, conversations with like, you're like, wow, I like this person. People like to work with people that they like,
Mm-hmm.
and things will just kind of often naturally organically develop. So it's a really great in to some other opportunities as well.
Absolutely. I love that. So let's talk about other types of alternative marketing and media.
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate of just using media in general. And one of the things that bigger media will do, and so not podcasting to say, but like, for example, traditional media, television and radio, is it really gives a lot of social proof. So if you've been featured on, a mainstream, network TV channel, or with a fairly big show, people are impressed by that. Like literally, it just helps people like, wow, this is a big deal. So I, as an example, was booked by Will Ferrell for his podcast. And that comes out in about 2 weeks. I don't know when this will be released, but end of March is when that will be released. And I can't tell you, just when I announced that I was booked on that, I booked clients from it because they suddenly were like, oh, well, I guess if Will Ferrell's talking to you.
Then you must be someone.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think this is just a very natural human thing. It's the same principle as reviews. Like when there's reviews, people like to read reviews because it helps kind of demonstrate what other people, have assessed about this person and that they're not, just full of it. So these are things that are very helpful for, kind of your website, for marketing in general, for social proof. And once you build some, it's easier to build another. So when I got booked for Will Ferrell's, one of the things that helped me is that I've done a lot of other media. So I have been on all the major, television channels. I have a reel, I've been featured on nationally syndicated shows that, and local shows. And I every media thing that you do, even if it seems small, I think it's important to list it. And then as you grow, you can remove the ones that are maybe not as significant. And I'm happy to also talk about some tactics for how do you book some of that media to start. If you don't
let's talk about it.
Okay, yeah. So one of the first things is it's really important to have professional marketing materials, professional photos. If you're wanting to get booked and let's say you have, in this case, your own jewelry line, yes, have obviously good photos of that, but you also need to have professional photos of yourself because they are not booking the jeweler, they're booking you to talk about it, for example. Mm-hmm. So making sure you have good photos of yourself, professional photos and materials like a one sheet. Have you guys talked about one sheets or that?
No, let's talk about it.
Okay, so a one sheet is like a one page document. It could be one-sided or two-sided that very simply explains whatever it is that you offer. So it usually has, photos and graphics, a simple description of, whatever it is. So yourself, if you're like a speaker, it could be one sheet about you and your services, speaking. It could be a one sheet about a jewelry line. It could be, a one sheet about a service that you offer. And basically, it's just a really quick way for someone to get a snapshot of, whatever it is that you are pitching, because people are busy. And I get, because I have several shows, I get pitched all the time, and I'm amazed by some of the pitches I get where I'm like, I don't have time to read several pages of stuff. Mm-hmm. I need to quickly, open this up, see, is this professional? Is this person in alignment with what it is that I'm looking for? And bam, I'm going to make a decision probably in under a minute, to be honest, because I'm busy. I don't have time to spend, digging into this. So you want to make it really easy for people to say yes. There's some really great templates and tools to make one sheet easily. One of them that I use is called Canva. Yeah. And you very simply, there's templates on there. You just can plug in your own photos, your own graphics, your own text. Things to make sure to include are good, professional photos of you. Make it clear whatever it is that you're offering, especially like bullets or simple, numbers or whatever, so that it's like in a glance, someone can be like, oh, this is what it is. Make sure you have your contact information on there. And, there's examples you can Google, one sheets. If someone emails me, I'm happy to share, some examples of what I do. And this is all part of a marketing course that I am just releasing as well with specific, suggestions for how to do these things easily.
Awesome. Amazing. I'm taking notes. I mean, I know what a one sheet is and I have one, but I'm like, what am I missing? I don't want to see yours. I'm like, let's see.
Yeah, I'm totally happy to, I'd love to see yours as well. Cause when we see other people's, it gives us ideas about what we like or what we don't like, so even if you have one, it's good to, see what else is out there and then revise it. And I do think that,
I was going to say, I like that you design it in Canva and make it all like super fancy instead of I would have like a picture and some small graphical designs, but it's interesting. I love that because you can really make something beautiful that represents who you are as a brand.
Absolutely. And especially with something that's so visual like jewelry, you really want something that communicates the feel and vibe of what is your brand? What are you offering? So I think that's really great, and it's not that hard. And again, if that feels overwhelming to you, hire someone, a freelancer to make it. You can do that on Upwork or Fiverr or whatever. There's so many different options now. Just set a budget. You can get someone to do it for $50 probably or less, especially if they're international, and look at samples and then see what you get in terms of different people that are connecting with you. But I have my assistants do some of that, and then I also do some myself. And you can do either way, but I do recommend that you either or someone else use Canva. I think it's such a great resource.
Yeah, we recommend it all the time. Canva is so easy to use, way easier than like Photoshop. I don't think the phone app is super intuitive, but the desktop version or the laptop version is super easy.
I think for the phone one, if you're doing something simple like just an Instagram post or something, it's good. But if you're doing something more complex, then you definitely want to use the desktop. And the other thing is with a graphic designer, if you ever want to make any changes, you're constantly having to go to that person.
Yeah,
things modified. Whereas for me, I'm got a new media thing. I want to put it on there. Or my numbers of my podcasts are up now. I don't want to have to pay someone each time to do that. I just want it to be really easy to just click and update and then resave. So it's great for that. And then I also would love to talk about one of the ways. So that's making sure you have good marketing materials. And then one of the ways to start getting bookings that I recommend is first of all, any contacts that you have, go through them. If you know someone who runs a show, always start with kind of low hanging fruits. And sometimes people just don't go there. They don't automatically think to do that, but it's super helpful. I just think it's if you have any contacts for local media or national media, always reach out to that first. But if you don't, there's a resource that was really beneficial for me that everyone can access, and it's free, and it's called Haro. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Help a reporter out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a website that people can log in and subscribe to notifications for sources needed for specific industries. So you can get, 3 daily emails where reporters of all different media, it could be radio, could be podcast, it could be television, are looking for sources for a particular topic. And that's a great way to get started. Now, one of the things I found with that is you do need to respond, and you need to respond usually fairly quickly, because sometimes they get so many responses, like the earlier ones are the ones that are going to gain traction. But I've used that to get national television bookings. And this is the thing, it does require a fair number of pitching, and you might not get traction right away, but once you do, again, it helps you book others. So once I got my national television one, and this was on a nationally syndicated show, and that even had some international, then I was on ABC, I was on NBC, and all these networks through that. And then I could share that with other pitches that I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I had a reel. I had, clips of me on television that could help me with that. So when Will Ferrell's office contacted, by the way, I didn't pitch them. They reached out to me because I was known enough in that area that when they wanted a psychic, they invited me. I was their first choice. And I asked them how they found me. And they said, actually they found me from a Yelp listing, which is something I also recommend doing. I have a good, Yelp listings and ratings. But then she said, I went onto your website. This was the producer. And she said, I spent several hours on your website, and then I contacted you. So making sure that all these things that you're doing, the media, the marketing materials, anything you've ever done, that you have a reel, that you have all that it's easily seen on your website, and that people can access it, because that will help with continuing to build and book other media.
Awesome. I love this.
I do think another great tactic is influencers. And it sounds like you do talk about that somewhat, but that's another thing that I found is really helpful as well.
Yeah, influencer partnerships are good. In fact, I was just on Yahoo Finance on TV. Speaking of,
saw that. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And, I think that especially it's like we talked about niche podcasts before. It's like finding those niche or micro influencers, I think can be really powerful because if they have a small and mighty engaged audience that really listens to them, and it's not really just about beautiful pictures in a feed, it can be a great opportunity for you to get in and sometimes not even have to pay to play. They're willing to do alternative arrangements for promotion, etc. So thinking outside of the blocks or outside of the blocks. I don't know why I said that. I saw outside of the Instagram blocks, outside of the box, but also with people that aren't necessarily fashion or jewelry influencers, but maybe I talked a little bit about this on Yahoo Finance, but like a mom blogger who is like taking pictures of ads all the time, or someone who has like maybe their neck or their wrists are being photographed a lot, and those are things that your jewelry can be featured on.
Absolutely. I mean, and micro influencers too, not just influencers, but people that have, a small but loyal following will actually sometimes sell more than someone with a large following. So I think honestly pursuing both is really great. And I mean, I'll just put it out there. Like I do red carpet stuff and post myself. If people want to send me their jewelry, I don't charge, if it's alignment, I like your jewelry, I'm happy to, at this point, at least to have it. And, that's fun for me as well. But yeah, connecting with influencer events, like recently I was booked to do an influencer event, and I have another one that I'm doing later this month. And the other thing is once you connect with, an influencer, a lot of times their social circle are influencers. So it kind of compounds on itself. So that is what led to me, for example, recently, connecting with Tori Spelling, who became my client, was through another influencer. So these things, again, it just kind of builds on itself, and you don't know, but just to do it and make sure you value yourself. But the value of that promotion is incredibly high.
Awesome. Yes, such great tidbits from podcasting to one-sheets to alternative sources of media, influencer partnerships. This has been so cool because I think we talk a lot about pitching traditional PR, and I've always like behind the scenes been like podcast, but this really helps reinforce like how getting on TV, getting seen and heard can be really, really powerful in growing a product-based business. So Laura, thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. It's such a pleasure.
Where can people find you?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about what we talked about, like tools, tactics, and tips for marketing and business growth, you can go to my website, powershour.biz. And that's where my marketing course is. If you want to learn more about my, healing and psychic work and podcast, it's healingpowers.net. And then the sort of creative side is laurapowers.net, which has a little bit of everything. And then I'm on Twitter at that Laura Powers. I'm on Instagram at Laura Powers 44, like the number 44. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also on Facebook at Healing Powers and Laura Powers.
Awesome. Lots of powers.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you, honey. Well, I got to say thank you for listening in today, my dear. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Next week, I'm bringing you episode 200. Hello, holla. And if you love what you've been hearing, I would love for you to give us a rating and review wherever you are listening to this podcast. I'm pretty proud that we've kept a 5-star record, and I love bringing the show to you every single week. It's really like my pride and joy. It's one thing that I absolutely love about running this business is that I get to create this amazing content every single week. And so I'm thrilled to just help you out with all those things. So yeah, give us a rating and review. And don't forget to sign up for the Sales Accelerator Masterclass. Head on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/sales accelerator. Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to, please share this podcast with your friends. Post it in groups. Just click the little share button whenever you see it. Copy the link to your favorite episodes, because we are trying to really make the most impact and touch the most designers as we possibly can. And so your help spreading the word about Thrive by Design is just so helpful. our audience is growing up day by day. And I'm really on a mission to help as many people as possible. Thanks so much for listening. And I'm looking forward to helping you flourish and thrive.